Alright, this video is going to be a brief introduction to justification arguments. So, these are really old school arguments. They were popular back when stock issues were really prevalent in debate and kind of the way that most people debated back then. And the way the justification arguments work is they argue that the affirmative failed to prove/justify a portion of the resolution true with their plan text 1AC. The key here is that you are arguing on the negative that there is a burden placed upon the affirmative to prove those things true. So, right, topicality is about the prima facie sort of understanding of whether it's topical or not, most of the time. Well, justification is an argument that moves beyond the prima facie understanding and says, well, it might be prima facie topical, however, we don't think you have actually good evidence to prove the resolution true in a certain aspect, and that is your burden as an affirmative, since you got to pick which AF you wanted to read to prove the resolution true. So the overarching rationale is that this practice kind of ended for large part in the early 2000s. But during that time and before then, justification was used to decide national championships in the CFL and what was NFL back then, now called the NDSA or NSDA. And those final rounds had justification arguments in them. And really, this is an effective way to be able to read critiques and counterplans in front of lay judges, because it boils down the debate theory and what the functions of counterplans and critiques are in a way that is palatable and communicable to the judges. When judges hear words like burden, i.e. the affirmative has a burden to prove the resolution true, not just obviously be topical, but to prove it to be true, it makes it really easy for the judge to be able to explain that they just don't think the burden of the affirmative was met by the arguments that were presented. And so this avoids a lot of the complicated debate theory that can go over lay judges' heads when you're talking about counterplans and critiques, and really get down to the brass tacks about what a counterplan or a critique is trying to do, which is say that the affirmative has not justified the resolution. And so we can frame it this way in order to be able to use the terminology of burden, which allows judges to quickly and easily explain that the affirmative did not meet their burden, or the affirmative did meet their burden to prove the resolution true on these key words, and as such have either won or lost the debate. So it really makes it easy to win debates on complicated debate arguments in front of lay judges, which is what I think makes the justification argument a beautiful argument to be read. There are three common areas that are going to be attacked by justification arguments. The first is going to be should. This is universally going to be the word that's going to be picked for critique arguments in your justification shell, because any epistemological critique, if you don't know what that is, you need to go back to the Introduction to Critiques lecture. But any epistemological critique functions here. It's basically like you are using calculative thought to justify your policy suggestion. We don't think you have justified the should portion of the resolution because you have not justified why calculative thought should be how we make decisions concerning policy. So anything that attacks the understanding or the way that the affirmative accrued knowledge is going to fit right in here real super easy like. The second is the United States federal government. This is going to be common for like counterplans and PICs especially. So if you're reading a state's counterplan, it would work really, really well here to just be like, hey, listen, we don't think the 1AC justified the use of the federal government. We think that there is a burden that they have to meet to prove that the federal government is the best way to go about this, and that we think the states can probably do it better than them, therefore disproving that they have not met their burden. They have not met the burden that the United States federal government should be the one that implements the plan, because we believe the states are a better way of going about it, and there is a net benefit that explains why it is better. And so it allows you to explain the counterplan in terms of burdens and explain what the affirmative has to do in order to win that debate. And then usually there's going to be a core controversy involved in any resolution. And in that core controversy, there's going to be solvency mechanisms. And so inside of those solvency mechanisms, there's core part of the controversy, there's going to be embedded critiques that are inside of there. So if it is a court topic or a topic that deals with court decisions, there's going to be a lot of really good literature that attacks the idea of jurisprudence inside of the United States and how our court systems are set up. And so you would be able to argue that they have not proven that term is correct via their 1AC, and that jurisprudence is not good and we should do something else. So those are kind of the three areas you're going to be there, but the key to all of them is that you are making the argument that the 1AC has not met the burden to prove the resolution is true via those words. The 1AC does not prove the federal government should be the ones who enact these plans. They just say that the plan is a good idea, but they can't prove that the federal government's the one that needs to do it. And as such, that's your articulation. They have not proven and met the burden of the affirmative. The affirmative has not met the burden of proving the resolution true because they have not proven or justified that the federal government's the one that needs to do this and not the states. If we win, the states can do it and do it better, then they should not win because they have not met that burden of the federal government. So Shell's going to kind of have that sort of explanation as to what we're talking about with the burden and how the burden is on the affirmative to prove that the federal government has to be the ones to be involved in the policy-making discussion involving the plan text, and that no one else could be able to do it. Yes, I'm using a counterplan example here. Then you're going to have judge instructions, which you're going to say something to the extent of, Judge, all you have to do is decide, did the affirmative meet the burden of the AF and prove to you and justify that only the federal government is capable of doing this policy. If we win that the states can do something else, they have not met, can do the plan, then that means they have not met their burden and have not justified the resolution, and you should therefore vote negative. And then and in your shell, you're going to specify those words that they didn't justify, and then you're going to use any evidence you would use in a normal, modern counterplan or critique, and you would put this here right after that sort of what word is not justified. The last thing to sort of talk about when we're sort of doing a crash course into the justification argument is that the alternative for the criticism you are reading when reading it as a justification argument has to be a rejection alternative. Otherwise, it's going to look like you're proposing something, and justification arguments don't propose anything. They just say, hey, the affirmative hasn't met their burden of proving the resolution true. They haven't proven the should component of the resolution because they have not proven economic rationality to be the best way to approach policymaking. if we win this argument and they have not justified economic rationality, then you should vote neg because they have not proven and met their burden of the word should and justified should. So it opens up a whole lot of doors. And so this justification argument may be 20 some odd years old since it was last run on the national circuit and real successful but it offers a whole lot of potential to be able to read some very interesting arguments in front of lay judges that some people just don't think is possible. And I think that is a myth. And this is how you can kind of prove them wrong.